What's up, my fellow Shield Brothers? It's the Shield Brother here with yet another weekly dose of history. Today, on this June 14th, we're going to be talking about two very important events of the American Revolution. Imagine this. The bludgeoning America, the brand new birth country fighting for its independence, has no army. It has no standing military. It has no even unified militia. So, what do we do? What do we do for the man who wants to enlist and wants to help fight for freedom? Well, obviously, the answer is we gotta create an army. So, that's where we begin. The Continental Army. So, the Continental Army was formed during the Second Continental Congress. Right. And after the outbreak of the American Revolutionary War, the colonies that became the United States established a resolution of the Congress on June 14, 1775. And this resolution was created to coordinate the military efforts of the 13 colonies, because as I said, there was no unified effort yet, in the revolt against the rule of Great Britain. The Continental Army was supplemented by local militias and troops that remained under the control of individual states or were otherwise independent. General George Washington was the commander-in-chief of this newly formed army and what would become the Continental Army throughout the war. Most of the Continental Army was disbanded in 1783 after the Treaty of Paris ended the war. However, the 1st and 2nd Regiments went on to form the nucleus of the Legion of the United States in 1792. But the fact is that the formation was very important because we had no true formation or infrastructure for our military efforts. So this resolution of the Congress on June 14th in 1775 was going to be, a very huge step forward for us because it gave us the tools that we needed to fight back against Britain. So what was the consistency of this army? You know who was in it. The Continental Army consisted of soldiers from all 13 colonies and after 1776 from all 13 states. When the American Revolutionary War began at the battles of Lexington and Concord on April 19th, the colonial revolutionaries did not have an army, as I previously stated. Previously, each colony had relied upon the militia of its own governance, made up of part-time citizen soldiers, for local defense or the raising of temporary provincial regiments during the specific crises such as the French and Indian War. As tensions with Great Britain increased in the years leading to the war, colonialists began to reform their militias in preparation of the perceived potential conflicts. Training of militiamen increased after the passage of the Intolerable Acts in 1774. Colonialists such as Richard Henry Lee proposed forming a national militia force, but the First Continental Congress rejected the idea. That's why it was important for the Second Continental Congress to pass that progression that I stated earlier in 1775. And it consisted of a wide variety of peoples. It was also the very first time that the army was racially integrated. It was a condition that the United States would not see again until Truman ordered the desegregation of the military in 1948. So it took almost 200 years to see our armed forces re-desegregated. And they were also promised freedom in exchange for military service if they had not already been freed in New England, and made up these African Americans, as they would become, were made up 1/5 of the Northern Continental Army. So, the evolution. On April 23rd, 1775, the Massachusetts Provincial Congress authorized the raising of a colonial army consisting of 26 company regiments. New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Connecticut soon raised similar but smaller forces. On June 14, 1775, the Second Continental Congress decided to proceed with the establishment of a Continental Army, proposing for common defense, adopting the forces already in place outside Boston, which was 22,000 troops, and New York, 5,000 troops. It also raised the first 10 companies of the Continental troops on a one-year enlistment, riflemen from Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, and Virginia, to be used as light infantry, who became the 1st Continental Regiment in 1776. So you can see where we added in these riflemen. On June 15, 1775, the Congress elected by unanimous vote George Washington as Commander-in-Chief, who accepted and served throughout the war with without any compensation except for reimbursement of expenses that he himself had given out of pocket. On July 18, 1775, the Congress requested all colonies form militia companies from all able-bodied effective men between 16 and 50 years of age. So that's a huge span there. It was not uncommon for men younger than 16 to enlist also, as most colonies had no requirement of parental consent for those under 21, or modern-day adulthood. So you can see how they made the first kind of conscription, which was used through all 13 colonies and given to this new Continental Army. So, the Continental Army was, as I said, racially integrated. It also had a lot of different nationalities due to the new colonies being a haven for everyone of different nationalities, religion, etc. So it had a very large basis and base for it to draw from. Throughout its existence, the army was troubled by poor logistics due to this and due to other factors. Inadequate training, short-term enlistments, interstate rivalries, and Congress's inability to compel the states to provide food, money, or supplies led to this and many other troubles for the army. In the beginning, soldiers enlisted for only a year, largely motivated by patriotism, but as the war dragged on, bounties and other incentives became more commonplace, and two major mutinies late in the war drastically diminished the reliability of two of the main units, and there were constant discipline problems due to these men not having to go through any dedication or training of sorts. So the dedication and discipline was a large con in the Continental Army. The army increased its effectiveness and success rate through a series of trials and errors, often at great human cost. George Washington, who was general, and other distinguished officers were instrumental leaders in preserving unity, learning, and adapting and ensuring discipline throughout the 8 years of the war. In the winter of 77 to 78, with the addition of Baron von Steuben, who was a Prussian general who was a huge key factor of training and discipline of the Continental, began the vastly improve. This was the infamous winter at Valley Forge. So this is where the basis for the training and discipline starts coming through Valley Forge and people such as Baron von Steuben, the Prussian general who helped discipline and train these men. Washington always viewed the army as a temporary measure and strove to maintain civilian control of the military, as did the Continental Congress, though there were minor disagreements about this and how this should be carried out. Near the end of the war, the Continental Army was augmented by a French expeditionary force under General, I'm a butcher this name, I'm so sorry, Rochambeau, and a squadron of the French Navy who was very key in the very end game. And in the late summer of 1781, the main body of the army traveled south to Virginia to rendezvous with the French West Indies fleet under Admiral Comte de Grasse. The result of this was the siege of Yorktown, the decisive battle of the Chesapeake, and the surrender of the British Southern Army. This essentially marked the end of the land war in America, although the Continental Army returned the blockade and British Northern Army in New York until the peace treaty went into effect 2 years later, and battles took place elsewhere between British forces and those of France and its allies. But you can see with this basis of the mixed peoples and etc., but you can see how this very key event on June 14, 1775 led to this and led to the victory for the new states, the new 13 states of America, the 13 colonies. You can see how the passage of the creation of the Continental Army on June 14th was so key and so important to the war, giving us the basis for, a stronger and more disciplined force to be able to take on enemies such as Great Britain. So the other important event on June 14th happened 2 years later, which was June 14, 1777, with Francis Hopkinson leading this key role. So the background on who this Francis Hopkinson was he designed the first official American flag, continental paper money, and the first U.S. coin. He was an author, a composer, and one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence in July 1776. As a delegate from New Jersey, he served in various roles in the early United States government, including as a member of the Second Continental Congress and chairman of the Navy Board. He also later served as a federal district judge in Pennsylvania after the ratification of the federal Constitution. So you can see how this man was very key and very involved in the growth of the new 13 colonies and United States. So here's the adoption. On Saturday, June 14, 1777, the Second Continental Congress adopted the Stars and Stripes as the first official national flag of the newly independent United States, and it's later celebrated as Flag Day. The resolution creating the flag came from the Continental Marine Committee. Hopkinson became a member of the committee in 1776. At the time of the flag's adoption, he was the chairman of the Navy Board, which was under the Marine Committee. Today, the office and responsibility of power would go to the residing United States Secretary of Navy. But at this time, you can see how he helped us get a identity with this new flag. On the left here, you can see the old flag that was being used, which was the Grand Union flag, which was the 13 colonies flag that we flew. But on June 14th, 1777, which is today, we also adopted the new flag, which was on the right. You can see the difference there, and you can also see the resemblance to the flag that we use now. Thank you so much for watching. This has been the Shield Brother with the History Armada for your weekly dose of history. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned a little something about the Revolutionary War for America. And as always, if you liked it, leave me a like. If you did not, leave me a dislike. And if there's some type of history or event or subject that you would like me to cover in future videos, go ahead and tweet at me or leave this in the comment section down below. And as always, this is the Shield Brother, and I'll catch y'all next time.